What?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Laura, Cam, you could take it away, please.
Good evening from Jerusalem. I'm Laura Cam, the Director of Communications at the Jewish People Policy Institute, the global think tank of the Jewish people. In light of the current crisis and ongoing war, JPPI is providing daily in-depth analysis and insights from Israel. Yaakov Katz, former editor-in-chief Yaakov Katz, former editor-in-chief for the Jerusalem Post and author of numerous books on military strategy. I understand I'm not being seen right now, but I will continue to speak. Yaakov Katz, former editor-in-chief for the Jerusalem Post and author of numerous books on military strategy and geopolitics, will open and moderate today's discussion. Also joining us live will be Shmuel Rosner, JPPI Senior Fellow, Researcher and Political Analyst. Gil Troy, also a JPPI Senior Fellow, historian, author, and prominent Zionist thinker, and Shuki Friedman, legal scholar and JPPI's Vice President. For our viewers, please ask your questions in the chat box and we'll get to as many as possible. Yaakov, over to you.
Thank you, Laura. Today we're going to do a bit of a different setup than we've been doing in the past. We usually have a panel that is about with our different experts. We're going to have that. That's going to be the second half. In the first part was an interview that I did with Yaakov Amidror, the former head of the National Security Council, just a few moments ago. And this is the interview with Yaakov Amidror. Here we go. Former General Yaakov Amidror. General Amidror was National Security Advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Chairman of the National Security Council, served almost 4 decades in the IDF, lots of different roles. Today, he is a Senior Fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, as well as a Distinguished Fellow at JINSA in Washington, D.C., and the author of a number of books about Israeli military thinking, policy, strategic thinking. So, Yaakov, thank you very much for joining us. And what I'd really love to understand from you, we had the failures that brought us until where we are, right? The intelligence gaps and everything that's happened. We know what was and where we are today. We're on the verge of what seems like a large-scale ground offensive into Gaza. And I'm curious, what should we expect to see there? What is the IDF going to encounter in terms of Hamas resistance?
I think that the decision which is leading almost automatically to the ground force operation is the decision that, unlike in the past, the goal of the operation is not kind of quiet years afterwards or a better situation or whatever, something which is more of the same. No, here the decision of the cabinet is to destroy the military capabilities of Hamas, and at the end of the war, Hamas will not exist in the Gaza Strip as an organization. I mean, people might like the ideas of Hamas, and Hamas might be a kind of political part of the Palestinian society, but at the end of the war, as an organization with any kind of a military capabilities, this organization will stop to exist. It's the end. And because the decision was to change the whole structure of the political military situation in Gaza, it cannot be done from the air, even if we will have another 100 days of air attacks. You have to go into the Gaza Strip. You have to find the member of Hamas from Sinwar down in their holes, in their underground tunnels, to kill them one by one, to destroy all the offices, all the stores, all the facilities that they have. Everything which was connected somehow to Hamas should be destroyed. They cannot be done just by kinetic Air Force operation. And here is the decision is as a result of the goal which the cabinet fixed for the declared for the operation, and that is leading to what we might see in the few days ahead. The Air Force is very active based on 3 elements. One is the list of the targets that we had in the bank. slowly are taking all the deposits out. Every target is destroyed. The second element is what we succeed to produce during the operation. For example, members of Hamas, commanders, and so on and so forth. And the third element is dictated by the ground forces plan, is to prepare the ground for the invasion. And this is more complicated, what is needed, what is not needed. In some cases, the fact that the collapsing areas are not good for the operation, it's more problematic. Anyhow, the war itself is going to be very, very challenging. It's known in the history of military science that the urban wars are very bad for the attackers and very easy for the defenders. It's not going to be easy. We will have losses in the operation, no question. But after what we saw and heard about the cruelty and barbarian methods of the terror organization, which is a combination of ISIS and Al Qaeda together called Hamas, I think that the Israelis are more than ready to pay the price if, and this is the big if the army at the end of the day will bring the results and Hamas will not exist anymore as an organization in the Gaza Strip.
So, okay, we saw what happened on Saturday, October 7th. They were, there was a lot of deception, some sophisticated tactics, the use of drones, the use of paragliders, the way they were able to quickly get across the border. Okay, but nothing spectacular in terms of capability. There wasn't like a special weapon that we didn't know they had. Is there anything that we should expect in Gaza? We know they have IEDs. We know that some of them are Iranian designed. We know they have tunnels. We know they have a lot of even Russian-made anti-tank weapons. Is there something more that we should expect to see, or it's just going to be a lot of the close quarter warfare in that populated area where they're going to pop, suddenly a Hamas guy is going to pop out of a tunnel with a Cornet missile and try to hit an Israeli armored personnel carrier, or is there something else?
Based on the experience of the last operation and that they did and others which are occurring around the world, including in Ukraine, it would be wise to assess that they have some surprises. And the definition of surprise is that you don't know about it in advance. But I think that basically for what we saw in the operation 8 days ago, 9 days ago, they didn't bring to the battlefield something which is taking out our capabilities. Yes, we were surprised. They override the defense, which was not ready to such an attack. They butchered many civilians. 1/4 of the casualties are people which celebrated in the festival. I mean, you don't need anything. As someone from America for interview, and he asked me all the time. I think about a group of terrorists coming to Woodstock in the 60s, and that was the situation. I mean, very devastating. But at the end of the day, it's barbarian system that will not help them with the forces which are going in. Do they have surprises? Probably yes. We don't have any good experience from the past about fighting in urban areas with many tunnels underground. It's Gaza Strip, full Gaza Strip under the ground. How we will do it, how we will identify where are the piers to enter to the tunnels, how we are neutralizing the tunnels themselves. Interesting questions. We don't have a good experience with that. I hope that we have good answers.
Do you expect, as a long-term veteran military planner, an intelligence officer, would you, if you're thinking about this now, and I'm assuming you don't know the operational plan, so we can hypothesize, would you be of the opinion you go in very slow and you move slowly, or do you go in with a lot of force quickly slice up the Gaza Strip, try to get to the other side, and start to do it with a lot of
I think that in open areas in which the urban area is not so closed, not so tense, it's better to use to run into the target. In very dense populated areas, slow and a lot of fire in front of you is better to advance. But I think that at the end, this is kind of an operation in which the success is in the details. It's very much depends on the leaders in front of the forces, how they see the opportunities, and they know where to stand and to wait to the kinetic fire to open the way, and where you can go ahead and use the uncertainty of the other side to achieve more targets. At the end of the day, you have to control the area, not to be everywhere, but to be in a situation in which you can kill everyone who tries to kill you,
right,
and to identify the centers of power, which most of them are connected to the underground tunnels.
There's one other thing that I was thinking about, and then I'll let you go, but that this is going to be a real test for the IDF. Not, of course, it's an operation, it's going to war, and there will be casualties, sadly, on our side, but on both sides. But it will also be a test of the whole of what the IDF has become, at least over the last decade, right? The IDF has not operated in a big way as a ground force since 2014, when it went in. It was considered a big operation, but it was small in scope when you think about a ground.
Very small, yes.
Very small. And the IDF over the last decade, especially under the last chief of staff, Aviv Kochavi, really became a very digital military in a lot of senses. We have a lot of active protection systems, like Trophy on the Merkava, as well as on the Namer armored personnel carrier, the digital army program, Tzayad, which is in all of the whole network, everybody talks together, a lot of standoff capabilities. This will be a big test to see how the IDF ground forces are. They have not really fought since 2006 in the Second Lebanon War.
Yeah, I agree with you that it will be a big test to the new kind of digital army, but I think that because it's an urban area, it also tests to the resilience of the people. Mm-hmm. Because in some areas in urban situation, nothing will save you but your resilience and your ability to stand and to take the initiative. And the contribution of the technology will be there, no question. Trophy is only one example, and others. But I think that it is more about the attitude of the young commanders at the low ranks, because it's not the Sinai Peninsula or even Lebanon in which you can go with a division or with the brigade and you can maneuver. Here, it is each group for itself.
Right.
And the combination of all these groups will lead to a success. But each commander will be under pressure by himself because the surrounding forces cannot be seen. It's in the second street. They're moving parallel to you, and there are few buildings between you and them. And what you see is only your own people. And the way that they will lead it, and the way that they coordinate without seeing each other, this will be the great test. And this is why I think it's a test not just for the digital army, it is a test to the stubbornness and the resilience of the commanders on the ground.
Let's hope. Thank you very much, retired General Yaakov Amidror. Thank you for joining JPPI today.
Thank you very much, and I hope that we will cross the test in good marks.
Amen. So I want to thank General Amidror for joining us, and to our panelists. What we're going to talk about today is about the aftermath of that conversation, and what is the feeling that we have on the ground now, as we head into this conflict, we head into this ground invasion, we heard a lot from General Amidror of the expectation, obviously the surprises that are coming, and how we never know exactly what to expect until we actually get in there, right? So Shmuel, I thought to start with you, what I found to be very interesting from his comments was obviously the expectation, but that this is a big test for Israel. I mean, people tend to forget that the IDF ground forces haven't really operated in a big way since 2006, since the Second Lebanon War, right? That's now coming on 17 years.
Not in a big day, but there were units that did fight in Gaza. True. After 2006. They fought in
2014, Gaza, 2008, 9,
a few rounds, and in some of them there was ground invasion, and ground forces did have to fight against Hamas forces.
Right, but for Israeli society, we have gotten used. We've fallen in love almost to an extent, right? It's a lot. We're shattering a lot of misconceptions with this war, right? The containment policy blew up in our faces. But now also this idea that we can do everything from standoff and kinetic strikes and just from the air, that's not what's going to happen here. There will be troops on the ground.
No, I agree.
Is Israeli society prepared for that?
Israeli society had no choice. The events of last week, the infiltration of Hamas terrorists into Israel and the massacre that they conducted in military bases and in settlements in the border area left Israel with no choice. This is similar in some way to what we had. If you go back 20 something years to 2002, 2003, when Israel was forced into the West Bank. Also, after many years in which Israeli forces and the IDF did not have to conduct a major maneuver or major war. And, Israeli paratroopers and the Golani Brigade and other brigades had to go into refugee camps in Jenin and Nablus and other areas. There was a question mark over their heads, and they had to fight and prove that Israel can still deal with such challenges and overcome. And I think in some sense, Hamas is as formidable as it is. The IDF is supposed to be stronger and is supposed to have the capabilities to defeat Hamas. And now we will have, the test is ahead of us. And truly Israel has no choice but to go into Gaza and try to show to itself and to the world that it is still powerful enough to overcome a challenge such as Hamas in Gaza.
Shuki, I wanted to ask you, you've had a lot of experience, especially with the IDF and when it comes to the legal aspects of it, right? And, there's been talk over the years how the Yoatzim HaMishpatim, the legal advisors of the military, have basically been almost a pair of handcuffs on military commanders' ability to get the job done, that whenever they want to attack something, they got to ask the legal advisor next to them, can I attack this target? Would you anticipate in this war and in this ground incursion that, I don't want to say all limitations are off and all restrictions are off. I think the IDF is obviously still going to do everything it can to minimize civilian casualties, but will there be more flexibility or more, a little more room to maneuver when it comes to engaging targets because of the nature of what we're experiencing?
First of all, for many years, and that's what happened today, Israel is following international law. It's really important to emphasize that we always go through trying to maneuver on a gentle balance between enforcing the law and obeying international law, but fulfilling or achieving the needed achievements in the battlefield. And through the years, starting from the history and to the current operation, legal advisors from the International Law Department within the military Troni division are sitting beside the commanders from the top to the field and instructing them what the international law is about any specific target and the battlefield in general, and the perspective.
Shuki, I don't want to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think maybe our listeners or viewers don't necessarily know exactly what you're saying. Specific targets are reviewed not just by intelligence and the commander how to attack, but specific targets are also looked at by legal advisors, right? That's the process.
First of all, very important to realize that what we see today in Gaza doesn't mean that Israel breaching the international law. Why? International doesn't require zero casualties. It do allow you to work proportionally and to target military targets, whereas you will know that you have casualties of civilians and others. Therefore, on one side, we do following closely international law and advising per target and per operation what the law say, but still aware of the needs of the army to achieve its goals in the battlefield, because otherwise we'll completely be fined for achieving the required achievements today, next few days, generally speaking.
So Gil, this whole conversation, which becomes very technical, right? Was this target within international law? And, international law, one of the big issues always is going to be proportionality. So, there's there's this great video, I forget who it was, recently did an interview, Douglas Murray, it's not proportional, people are saying. So, okay, what should proportion be? Should Israel go in and rape the same number of women and kill the same number of babies? That's what you want? I mean, obviously, that's not what's going to happen. But when we start to say, no, this building had 5 Hamas guys, but there were 10 civilians, and therefore it's proportional, you're going to lose the argument right there when you start at that point. Now, it's okay for a legal argument, but when we have to make a public diplomacy argument, is any of this really relevant?
First, I want to say Shavua Tov and Chodesh Tov. I think it's important that we keep to the niceties and wish people not just a better week and a better month, but a good week and a good month. And I think it means more now than ever before. Look, I think we have to think about this in 2 different levels. One, there's the internal Israeli conversation, where given the trauma and the horrors of last Saturday, when he was being called the Black Saturday, there's a feeling of we've allowed them to let us to let the niceties handcuff us for too long. And so in many ways, the message that Israel is starting to give to its friends, and the message that I'm frankly giving to my friends, is that whereas for a long time we were going and we're saying, look, we're really, really nice. Look, we follow international law. Look, we have wonderful people like Shuki who assess every target. Now we're saying we're going to do what we need to do in order to survive. The word that everybody's using is QME, existential. And you're going to try to have to make it look as good as it possibly can. Having said that, I think it's really important that our leaders show some restraint. I don't think it's helpful for our Minister of Defense to start calling them human animals. I don't think it's helpful for a kind of blustery language that both escalates the war aims and promises both the Israeli public and the world things we can't achieve, but also diminishes our moral stance, particularly now, even before things have started. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to have proportionality in the way we approach this, but I think we have to be very, very strategic, very, very surgical. And as a historian, I'm and look, we're ultimately really talking about the American public. So I'm starting to do a deep dive into World War II, into the Civil War, into the fight against ISIS, into the fight after 9/11. At the end of World War II, there was a huge debate of, do we stop now? It's 1944, we've made most of our gains, or do we go for unconditional surrender? That's echoing one of the issues of the Civil War when it was US grant, unconditional surrender grant. And when you are fighting both a war that has a clear moral dimension to it. And this one, after the awful events, has a clear moral dimension to it. And second is existential. Legally, it changes, but also psychologically, it changes. And I think that's what we have to keep the focus on. I'm much more concerned about the cost that we're going to pay in terms of lives. I'm much more concerned about a second front up north. And I'm much more concerned about just how long it'll take us to even achieve the degradation of Hamas structure. And I just don't want our own leaders escalating things rhetorically in a way that just doesn't help.
So Shmuel, politically speaking for a moment, because it's like, the political military balance today is very much intertwined with one another. Israel cut off water, cut off electricity, cut off gas supplies to Hamas. If you ask me, legitimately, right, there's no reason we should be supplying any of that to an enemy. And they have a border with Egypt. Egypt can give them whatever they want, right? Obviously,
well, water supply to the southern Gaza Strip was renewed.
Correct. So that's where I'm getting. So we did that in the beginning. Today, Netanyahu decides to renew the supply of water to the southern Gaza, right, to be able to facilitate. And this is Yisrael Katz, who's who's now the energy minister, soon to be again foreign minister, member of the security cabinet, says the only reason we're doing that is to facilitate the transfer of people from the north to the south. So kind of like almost trying to save face a bit, because you don't want to look weak. You need to keep appearing strong. So how much of that are we going to see over this next week or two of, we have to renew the water. Biden's asking us to do it. So that's why we're kind of doing it. But yeah, it also, there's a narrative that you can tell that helps with keeping the country feeling like we're tough on Hamas.
Well, that's the way things are going to be. This is a constant balancing act between different priorities and different objectives that Israel has. Saying that we are going to renew water supply in the south in order for us to be able to tell people in the northern Gaza area, okay, you want water, just go south, as we told you 2 days ago. That's a legitimate thing to do. It's also clear that Israel does not want to have on its hand a situation in which people in southern Gaza begin to die because they don't have water. So again, you want to pressure them as much as possible without causing a human rights disaster. That's the basic idea. You do not want to weaken yourself during a war, but you also do not want to weaken yourself diplomatically or internationally during a war. This will have to be, as I said, a constant balancing act. We will see it with the way Israel fights the war in Gaza on the ground. We are going to see it when Israel deals with its diplomatic relations with Europe and the United States. And you said Biden asked Israel to do this or that. We should understand that American support comes with a price. We see a hug, an American embrace since last week. For a year or so, President Biden did not want to talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Yesterday, he spoke with him for the 5th time a week. Secretary of State Blinken was here last week. He's coming back again tomorrow. So this embrace by the American is both, giving us some sense of empowering by the United States, but it's also a restriction. You want to keep this thing going on, then you have to both accept the support of the United States, but with it comes some limitations or restrictions. And I think, at least up until now, it was worth it. Although I must say there might be a moment in which the Israeli government would tell the Americans that they must back off, that they are asking for too much, and that certain things that the Americans want Israel to do are impossible because for Israel, the priority is winning this war. And Gil is right. Israel climbed a very high ladder in rhetorical terms, and we are now up this tree. If we do not defeat Hamas, this will be a failure. So the goal is very ambitious, and that's the goal the Israeli government is going to insist on. And if the Americans or other players are going to try and limit Israel in a way that makes the achieving of such goal impossible, that Israel will have to resist it.
By the way, what is the victory over Hamas is a whole term of itself that we will discuss. But I've heard you were talking about America and Biden. So in America, I remember everyone would call, him Uncle Joe, right? That was the obviously the nickname. I've been hearing a lot here, Saba Biden or Saba Joe, right? Ever since he's given all these speeches and really giving us this hug and sending all these aircraft carriers. It's like a grandfatherly love. Shuki, I do want to go to you though, because kind of playing off what Shmuel just said, what is this victory against Hamas? So you also specialize to an extent in Islamic law. And one of the things that you've been thinking a lot about and writing a bit about is the whole misconception that happened here, the intelligence failure, the defensive posture, the deployment of IDF forces. A lot will be investigated about that. But there's something much deeper here of how to actually confront an enemy the likes of Hamas. What do you mean by that?
Just before that comment on Shmuel, we have to remember that in his moving speech, Biden mentioned that democracies fighting according to humanitarian law. It's also take important part in the conversation with Netanyahu. So the American watching, backing, but following.
Right.
Now for the Islamic perspective of this tremendous massacre on the South. We basically rational people. We, the Western Israelis, Americans, assess the other side intentions and calculations in a rational way. And therefore, for many years, that's what Israel done. And this was a misconception because we thought that if we give to the Hamas leadership the interest to keep the Gaza Strip quiet, to keep the Gazan workers work on the other side of the border inside Israel, to get more electricity and more water and to prosper, they will actually postpone or give up their goal to demolish Israel. But this is a misconception because we are confronting religious people with a deep religious beliefs based on the very long roots in Islam. The jihad is one of the pillars of Islam. Not all Muslims believe in it, but Hamas do and declare on it. And not only Hamas, but also Iran and Hezbollah and ISIS, they're all religious militants, which means whenever they have the capability of executing the jihad, religious war, they will do it. And therefore, after 3 or 4 years, where they kept their conflict with Israel very moderate and developed the capabilities of doing what we've seen last week, they executed. And furthermore, this is really something Israel should demonstrate to the world. We are a front post. We are the front post of the Western world. We are rational. We want to prosper, but many elements around us want a completely different fulfillment of a vision, which is religious, and which means the world is actually Dar el-Harb, the other side of the world we have to free, and the Dar al-Islam, the side of the world is already Muslim. And through the years, whenever we have the capabilities and abilities and power and military power and force to fulfill this vision, we will do it. Iran saying it, Hezbollah saying it, Hamas declaring it. We just have to read and to understand it's not only something that they are just declaring for the purpose of their believers. This is their policy, and therefore not resources, not land, not Al-Aqsa itself wants their interest. The interest is to take over non-Muslims and to take over the Western world. And we are a front post in a historic test. And if we succeed, we'll be able to block these efforts towards the Western world, and therefore the importance of the backing of the US and also the UK and France and Germany, crucial because they understand that it's not only about us, it's about all of us.
Very interesting. Gil, before we just sign off, one of the big issues that's obviously out there, and we'll have to talk about this more as the week progresses, but is going to be hostages, right? Especially as the ground invasion or the ground incursion, starts to begin, and Israel is on the ground in there. It'll be very hard to find these people if they can even be found. One thing that's been playing out, though, is the embrace of the Americans, of the American-Israeli hostages. And on the counter side, Netanyahu, I saw today at some point there was some push that came out on my phone that Netanyahu will be meeting at some point with some of the families, right? But until now, he really hasn't spoken to them and hasn't met with them.
No. The meeting is taking place now.
Meeting is taking place now. Thank God. Okay, thank you, Shmuel. Antony Blinken, when he was here on Thursday, met with the American-Israeli hostages. President Biden on Friday did an hour-and-a-half Zoom call with the 12 families, about 12 families. Why is Netanyahu now? Why is it only happening now? These people were taken on Saturday of last week.
First, just bridge the two conversations. There's an American legal phrase, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. I think we have to update it and say civilization is not a suicide pact. And I think there's been a shift in the Israeli mindset. The numbers of dead are so staggering, and the numbers of kidnapped are so staggering that Hamas overplayed its hand, and actually the value of the kidnapped victims to a certain extent has been diminished, because Israelis are now seeing how they are threatened. They're also seeing how many people who were freed by the Gilad Shalit deal were actually involved in planning and executing this massacre. And I think we have to really play an inside-outside game. I think the Canadians, the Americans, the Germans, the Thais, those, I think, I've heard there are 34 different nationalities of the citizens who are hostages. They need to push the hostage issue aggressively as possible. And we should be bombarding their social media with all the sentimental stories and all the heartbreaking stories and all the outrageous, immoral acts that are being perpetrated and have already been perpetuated on our people. But internally, I think we really have to kind of put it aside, because I think we see as much, and it breaks my heart because I know some of these people personally, it's a distraction. The focus has to be on winning this war so that we can live our lives, so that our babies and our grandparents can walk freely on the streets of Jerusalem and of Gaza corridor and of Tel Aviv. And it's a very painful moment in Israeli history, but this also might be the moment where hostage taking ends, because civilization is not going to be a suicide pact, and sentiment isn't going to be a suicide pact.
Shuki, Shmuel, any response to Gil's comment about the hostages moving to be a secondary issue?
I'll just say that had he said the same things in Hebrew on Israeli TV, this would be considered highly controversial. For Israelis, the issue of the hostages and the kidnapped civilians and soldiers is a highly emotional issue. We've seen in the past that Israel is willing to go not an extra mile, but an extra 10 miles or 100 miles to get its prisoners and hostages released. And the sentiment is still there. I agree with Gil that we have the highest priority for Israel now is to win this war, and we put the bar on a high level. So this will be a difficult task, but I think that for Israel it is essential to understand that for Israelis, both the public and for the government. The issue of the hostages is highly emotional, and it's not easy for Israelis to, quote unquote, give up on these people in any sort of way. We need to find a way to both fight for the hostages and win the war at the same time.
Shuki?
There are 2 points that we should address along the time. First of all, the question of hostages is internal and external. We should play the card outside and be very sensitive towards the families over here and the Israeli sentiment, but still, I completely agree with Shmuel and Gil, we have to win the war because it's existential war. And if you don't demonstrate our ability to win this war and to stand on the path we've put, wouldn't have any rights, not moral right, but practical right to be existing in this very violent region. Also, we have to be aware of what's going on the Israeli or Hamas sentiment worldwide, because in the first 2 days, we've seen almost complete support to Israel, and Hamas supporters were very calm and was shocked by the disaster or the massacre Hamas have done. But by the time Hamas is trying to flip the situation, and by lies, they're trying to maneuver the reality and claim that they've done nothing, or the things that attributed to them are not their deeds. And if you follow the social media and demonstration in European capitals, in other world capitals, you can see that Hamas is getting back support, and we should follow up this sentiment and push back, because it's not a moral and military operation here. It's a worldwide effort we should continue to do to grab as much legitimacy we can to continue this movement.
Okay, thank you to our panelists. Laura, back at you.
Thank you. This has been a JPPI Daily Inside Analysis. Tune in again tomorrow at 1800 Israel time as our rotating roster of experts will communicate with you through this daily webinar and subsequent podcasts available wherever you listen for as long as the crisis in Israel continues. Additionally, as many individuals from abroad have asked how they can directly support Israel at this time, contact us at info@jppi.org.il and we will promptly respond with relevant information. Good night from Jerusalem.